welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am Jessikah. I am your librarian host today, and I'm here with an author of a really cool book. Please introduce yourself and tell us about Bindle Punk Bruja.
Yeah, I'm Desideria Mesa. I'm really thankful to be here. Thanks for having me on. My book, Bindle Punk Bruja, is a debut. Really excited about it because just what all it encompasses. I started out wanting to tell my family's story, kind of a little bit of their journey here. And also I love magic, so I had to include some of that. But it's basically about a white passing daughter of a Mexican immigrant family who lived and grew up in the boxcar communities down by the railroads in Kansas City. And so she encounters all forms of sexism and racism and all of those things that were flaring in the 20s. And just finding out who she is, being proud of where she came from, just a journey in that. And of course, from a long line of brujas, or that's Spanish for witch. So she's got some really cool powers as well.
So I think one of the things that is lost because we don't use video on the podcast most of the time, unless we're doing like a live event, is that I kind of made like this little nod when you were saying the 20s, because one of the things I really love about reading the book, but also hated because unfortunately this is reality, is just when you're reading it and when you're reading what it's her name is Luna, but in the white passing, when she's passing as white, she goes by Rose. So she's like living this dual life. But the things that she encounters are just really, I mean, it was so well, what I loved about it is that it was so well woven into the story. What I hated about it is the fact that, this is actually not just the 20s. This is not much different or different at all than what happens today. But I think that the way the narrative put it in was not like, I think you're a little too on the nose there. It wasn't like that at all. It was like, oh, right. Because this is unfortunately how people still think things should be, or, how people of color or people who are from other marginalized communities, LGBTQ, are still treated. So it was, which by the way, it was just a beautifully, effortlessly diverse book that just showed this time period in a light that we have not seen it before.
Thank you. It was actually interesting because I did not set out to tell all of those parts of the story. It just ended up being there because as I began to research 1925 Midwestern America, that is exactly what happened. As I began to realize, oh my goodness, how much has not really changed. And while we have made great strides in the women's movement, LGBTQ, I mean, we have, and I want to give, credit to those who have blazed trails. Of course, we've made progress, but there's still so much work to do and so much to be said. And, in regard to how society views women, just the political arena this year has been overwhelming with just how much work we still have left to do. So that was the biggest thing that stood out were the stories that I was finding in 1925 and just how similar the battlefield still seems to be today in those issues.
So let's talk a little bit about Luna / Rose. She is, she has a Mexican mother. She has a white father who is no longer in the picture. And she comes from a long line of brujas. However, she has power, but it's not necessarily what the power that she believes she's come into is not necessarily the extent of what she actually has, and things change and move as the story goes on.
Right.
Where did her story begin for you? And tell us, because I know what it is because I've read the book, but what does Bindle Punk mean?
So Bindle Punk is just another term. It was a term in the early 1900s for wanderer, or, just kind of almost vagrant, like someone who doesn't have a home. And, being mixed can leave feelings like that don't know where you belong. And Rose / Luna's journey in the book is, where do I belong in this society, especially because she has to hide half of who she is and can't quite figure out which one is her. It can make you feel like, you really don't have a place. And it also has kind of a dual meaning because, the Mexican society in the early 1900s in Kansas City, they were still, we were still trying to find our way, weren't allowed to rent out or buy in a lot of parts of the city. You can look at title deed restrictions and see old ones where it just says whites only, for ownership. And so, and especially with the language barrier, not having a lot of places to go. And so you have families living in these boxcars and it's like, we really don't know where we belong. So that's kind of been the meaning behind Bindle Punk. It has a lot there to it. So I may have missed some of the first part of the question. I think it was layered, but
yeah, just about the character of Luna Rose. Where did she come from when you started writing this? She's got a really powerful voice, and she's sort of, she asserts, I am who I say I am.
yes.
But then she's not really sure who she is at different times, and it's throughout the book she sort of holds herself to certain standards, kind of holds herself apart from certain people, and there's this just beautiful found family, which is sort of part of the journey of this book, which is woven in with like gangsters and bootlegging, because she owns a speakeasy. It's really cool. So there's so many facets to her.
There are. So the I am who I say I am, that it really was personal to me. I mean, I don't know how many authors don't have at least one book where that main character is like a representation of them. and Luna is a lot, in a lot of ways, going through a journey that I've gone through that I feel like I'm still going through. So, not just with who I am, with my family, ethnically speaking, but also just who am I, where I've come from. I was in I kind of grew up, and especially in my teenage years, I was a part of a very conservative mindset, a very conservative group. And I kind of had to come into myself once I got into my mid-20s and 30s. It took me longer than most people to start trying to think for myself. What did I really believe about women's issues and LGBTQ and about all of these different issues, and had to learn who I really am. And when you start taking a stand for things, especially if you're surrounded by people who disagree with you, they might start saying some things or assuming some things about you, and you have to be firm in who you are. And I'm not who everyone says that I am. I am who I say that I am. And that's really powerful, because you can change the whole narrative in your head by not listening to everyone else. It's easier said than done, but that it starts with that statement, like, who do you say you are? I think it's kind of powerful.
Without a doubt. And some of the other characters, her grandmother, Mama Sunday, was very interesting, very
Yes.
cool. I really liked her. Her brother Javier.
Yeah.
loved. And then
I love Javi. Mama
oh
Sunday was a
yes.
favorite. Mama Sunday was a favorite with the publishers, with my agent, with beta readers. She actually, so my great grandmother, my abuela Dominga Mesa, because her name was Dominga, which is Spanish for Sunday, we called her Mama Sunday, and so that's where she kind of comes from, and the humor comes from my grandfather's side, just real silly and almost taking nothing seriously, and then all of a sudden there's a switch, but yeah, everyone loves Mama Sunday.
Yeah, and it's a witchy name too.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if it's like my Gen X love of Wednesday Addams or what, but there's just something witchy about having a name that's like a day of the week. And of course, if depending on what mythology you know of how the days were named or what the days are called in certain places, a lot of the days have either a connection to one of the gods or like
Oh
some
yeah.
sort of celestial, like Sunday is the day of the sun.
Yeah.
So that's like again, I was just like, oh, Mama Sunday, I kind of love you. And then there's just like I said, there's so much in this book that I want to talk about, but I also don't, because I feel like if I do, I'm going to be robbing readers of
Yeah.
some of the really
Spoilers.
fun things, even just stuff that you learn in the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
About these characters. But there are other characters like Heck Kessler is this I guess he's like the son of if you want to talk about him a little bit without talking about him too much.
Yeah. Little bit of not just Kansas City history, but many, if not most of the major cities in the United States had a developer behind their parks and rec and their boulevards in the early 1900s, late 1800s. His name was George Kessler. He came from Germany. And he was a real person. Now, his made up grandson, Heck, in the book is a fictional character who comes into his own. He's based off of other real people that are in my life. So I love Heck. He is probably, I don't know, I have a hard time picking a favorite, but everyone seems to love Heck. But the real guy, George Kessler, came in, and as he was developing these parks and boulevards, a lot of things happened in the cities that aren't quite in the newspapers. If you look through the history books, you have to displace, in order to create this beautiful city, you have to displace, in Kansas City, for example, over 50 African-American families were displaced out of the hillside, just told, you have to go, we're going to build some beautiful parks and boulevards here. And they had to go find homes. And they have a real powerful story. They actually stormed the courthouse and wanted, they wanted to be compensated for having to abandon their homes all of a sudden. And they actually won. I don't know. I couldn't find a record of how much they got. I doubt it was much, but just the bravery of that era to go and advocate for themselves. But this is what was going on when you're planning parks and boulevards and you see hillsides and you see entire minority families living in those hillsides, and you're gonna just make plans that wipe them out entirely. And the city doesn't help, move families around. There's just a lot of dark history there, I guess to say. A lot of just not good humane practices that were going on. And so Heck, in the book, to not give anything away, obviously, our main character does not like the Kessler family, does not like who Kessler stands for. And yet you have this beautiful person who comes out of that family that is not like the family, which is another lesson to be learned, that we don't have to be like our ancestors, our forefathers at all. We can forge a new path, so to speak.
So I also want to know, just because it's just, there's so many great witchy books, and I don't think that the fact that there is a wealth of witch books or books with witch type characters or themes really robs from each other, because each one is great, be it light, be it something a little bit darker, be it something historical with magic. It's just been beautiful. But for you, why Bruja? Why witches? Why Bruja? Why was this a really important part of Luna's story?
Well, on probably a less deep level, I love books with magic. I love fantasy. So of course I want to tell a story with magic in it. But in this particular sense, I wanted something to represent self-identity and the power within yourself, without coming right out and saying. I didn't want it to just be a journey about, Luna finding out who she is, but you can use the magic and you follow it throughout the book. You're going to see some pretty strong symbolism there of just how powerful we become when we realize who we are and what kind of power we actually have. So it's really representative. And I wanted to tie it to the earth because I just wanted it to be more grounded. And I think that is very beautiful. And also just the research of brujeria in Mexico is really a fun and interesting one as well. So I wanted to tie it back to the kind of the roots.
Yeah, definitely. And so what kind of research did you do both into brujeria and also into this time period and the Jazz Age, which is also just a really beautiful, compelling time period in general?
It probably started out about 6 or 7 years ago when I was in an English writing class in college. I took a class and I had to do a research paper, and I chose to research parks and boulevards. We had to do like a historical research, and it really started with George Kessler and Kansas City. And as I began to find out all of the different, just with J.C. Nichols and the different title restriction things that were going on to keep non-whites out of certain parts of the city. Of course, we know that went on, but to really read how they did it at the same time that I know my family's coming into this city and they're living in boxcars and they can't rent other places and they can't live other places. And the powerful journeys of coming from that place to where we are now, it kind of all started with a research paper in college. And then of course, talking to my family about our journey here.
That's really cool. Wow. That's really, really interesting that's where it all came from. I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah, or some of it. I just kept going down the rabbit hole. I would find, and I've been doing some TikToks on the Mexican boxcar community, but as I just tumbled down that research, I found just one horrific thing after another. The resilience of those that came before us is incredible. It's just incredible what they endured.
Wow. Well, like I said, I love this book. I really think that I definitely want to recommend it to whoever's listening. Again, like I don't want to shortchange it because there's so much in it, but I also don't want to start blurting things out because they were so much fun to figure out with Luna. I just had so much fun, you think a certain scene is going to go a certain way, but then it doesn't. And Luna's power, she has the power of charm, but also she can sort of read people. Really, especially when she touches their hands, and at certain points you're just like, oh man, this, and then you're just like, oh no, wait, not that. Which was definitely charming, to use a pun. One thing though I do want to ask before we go is the language in the book. It was really fresh and it felt very natural for the time period. Did you just watch a bunch of gangster movies from that time period, or did you read did you watch newsreels? Did you read stuff about just the rhythm of how people spoke?
Yeah, everything, all of the above. So even just our what do you want to call it? We had kind of a criminal mayor, or city councilman, I should say. I watched all kinds of reels and documentaries, and then I, of course, looked up lists and paragraphs and how things were said. And I tried to choose things that weren't as well known, things that weren't going to be quite as Gatsby. And especially using queer terminology from the 1920s, I thought was even just to me, it was just fascinating. And I wanted to bring to light that we still had LGBTQ. It's not like there's more today than there was then. There just was an underground and there was a way of speaking, and in the immigrant communities. And so it was just fun to put that, to be quite honest, it was just really fun to put that together. So yeah, I guess I did listen a lot to how people spoke. And I'm glad it came across authentically. That was fun for me.
Thank you so much. This book is awesome. When is it due out officially?
The 13th. So the 13th. Almost here.
And when can we, where can we actually find you on TikTok? Because that sounds great.
So my handle should be the same as it's Desideria at Desideria Mesa, same as my Twitter handle.
Excellent. Well, please check out Bindle Punk Bruja. It is great, not just for Halloween season, but literally anytime. Are you going to write in this universe again, by the way?
So yeah, we actually have a sequel that's due to come out next year. So it's already in the making. That one's going to be a lot of fun. I don't want to give too much away on that one, but we're definitely going darker on just about everything, a lot higher stakes. I can't wait.
Once again, this is Jessikah with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Very, very much anticipating that book. And our guest today was the author of Bindle Punk Bruja.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.